But Brandon, let's move on into our next topic, and this is a special one, just like we did. What was it? Was it last week?
Just last week.
I think it was last week. We had Patrick in, one of our patrons, and we are welcoming in yet again another patron here to Most Valuable Podcast, Matt, calling all the way from, I think it's Rockford.
It is right? Rockford.
From Illinois. Matt, how are you doing today, buddy?
Doing great, guys. How about you?
Oh, I can't wait. This is probably, like I told Brandon, I'm excited for this topic because somebody finally wants to talk Big Ten.
Amen.
Like, I mean, I try to slide it in every then, and Brandon's like, come on, Ricky, the Big Ten's not that good.
It's you and Matt. It's you and Matt. It's literally two people that want to talk Big Ten. No. I think we've found the only two in the Midwest.
And that's exactly, and what we're going to look at today is basically the overarching topic is that we're looking at when it comes to March Madness, how many teams from the Big Ten are going to make March Madness when we get all the way to March. However, I want to start off kind of looking at kind of an overview of the Big Ten because this is the first time in my life to where when I look at Joe Lunardi's bracketology, he has 4 teams right now in the field for March Madness. He's got Michigan, he's got Purdue is one of them, Michigan State, and then the last one that I'm looking for that is blank in my mind is Ohio State. So he's got a 3 seed, Michigan's at an 8 seed, Michigan State's a 2 seed, Purdue is a 1 seed. So, Matt, I want to go to you first because this is your topic that you're bringing into us. What's your kind of thought of the Big Ten as a whole this year and them only having, I know Joe Lunardi's not the committee, but them only having 4 teams when it comes to the bracketology bracket at this point in the year?
Yeah, so right now I tend to agree that seems pretty appropriate. The only, and we can get into this, but the only team that I might also throw in there right now is Maryland. But they're a bubble team for sure. I think, the Big Ten as a whole is down, and I think that's fair, and that was illustrated right in the beginning with the Big Ten ACC Challenge. The ACC dominated that. I think 11-3 was the final total there. So, some of that's matchups, but I do think it kind of told the story. And I think what you're running into now is the Big Ten has a couple of good teams at the top, and I don't want to discredit any of them because the rest of the league is maybe down. But the middle to the bottom of the league, I think it's a bunch of, I don't want to call it crap, but
I'll call it crap.
Yeah,
because it's crap.
It's teams beating up on one another, and then no one can establish a good resume because of that, right? So you're going to struggle to get more teams in for that reason alone. So, yeah, as a whole, they're down. I think a lot of that is because of teams like Wisconsin, traditional powers, they're down. And then Northwestern and Minnesota, everyone had them, top 4. And you look at the standings, they're towards the bottom. So I think that's really hurt the overall look of the Big Ten.
Well, I mean, and that's exactly it. And I just kind of looked up the ACC Big Ten Challenge really quickly. This was the first year that either of the conferences had double-digit wins by one side. The most that anyone had had before was we might have been able to see this a little last year when the ACC won 9 compared to the Big Ten's 5. This year, you hit it right on the head, Matthew. It was 11-3. Before that, it's like 6-8, 6-8. Ooh, 6-6 here. The Big Ten, the only time they really dominated was 2011 when they won 8 compared to ACC's 4 games. And maybe it's just me, but I feel like with the Big Ten this year, every other year, like couple years, there's always been this little spark, this little excitement when it comes to the Big Ten. When you get to, and like I said, maybe it's because we're from the Midwest, we get that spark. But like you said, Matt, the Minnesotas, the Northwesterns, even like the Nebraskas. I know Nebraska's 5-3 right now, but these middle teams, it was always like, you know what? There's about 5 at the top, and then all these bubble teams. Whereas this year, it's like, okay, there's these 4, maybe even 3, and then all of these bubble teams. Because like Minnesota, yeah, they're 14-8 overall, but you got 3-6 in the Big Ten. You've got Northwestern's 3-5. Wisconsin this year at 3-4. And I wonder this year is it because the Big Ten isn't beating up on each other? Because most of the non-conference records for all the schools are fairly well. The only one that was the worst, I think, might have been either Iowa or Illinois, who is at the bottom of the Big Ten. But is it because, hey, you know what? We've got all these teams now beating up on each other, but not in the way we did before, where it was like, hey, a team like Maryland, who's 4-4, could go into Purdue and beat Purdue. But now Purdue's 8-0 in the season. You've got Ohio State 8-0 in the season. The top teams aren't really losing in conference like they might have lost a year or two ago.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of that. I mean, the teams aren't, you think of any college road game in the other leagues, and you're questioning every one of them just because it is a road game. But then I had the joy to witness Purdue play at Iowa on Saturday, and before you knew it, Purdue's up 11 a few minutes into the game, and they're up 31 at halftime, and it's over, right? So you're seeing a lot more. Like, I look at Purdue or Ohio State's schedule, I struggle to find any games I could really even think of questioning as a loss, right, to the bottom tier teams, just because I don't really think they have enough to challenge them.
And I mean, the thing I'm looking at right now, and this will be before we go to you, Brandon, is last year Purdue was at the top of the conference. They had 4 losses in conference. The next 2 teams below them were at 12-6. Wisconsin was one of them. Then 2 years ago, this is 2016 now, Indiana was at the top with 3 losses, Michigan State at 5, but then you had Maryland, Purdue, Iowa, and Wisconsin all with 6 losses, and then Ohio State with 7. So the middle was even more jam-packed, whereas this year it's kind of dividing into 2 halves and not 3 being good, bad, and then the middle.
Well, I think that, you take a look, and some of these teams that you already kind of talked about that you hit on. Well, Northwestern at 3-5 in the conference, 12-9, they really have come back down to earth after what they did last season, which is kind of a shame because they did play so well last year, and I think we were shocked. I mean, you and I, we were looking at each other, we're like, when is this going to end? There's going to be a time when it just hits, and they're gonna finally slip back down, and they really didn't do that. They got to the tournament, they played well, they made a run that was. You could look at that and you go, wow, Northwestern played really well for themselves this year, and they, up until the end, played one hell of a basketball game. And then Wisconsin, it just surprises me, and I know that you can say that they lost, players from last year, and they lost, a big senior group and everything, but, as you always say, next man up, and Wisconsin's really struggling to get those guys and get a rhythm going where they can actually see results. They're just not there. Minnesota surprisingly low this season, and then Rutgers through Illinois, no one is surprised with. But you even go to Indiana. No more Tom Crean. And Matt, I know that's one of your favorite coaches in college. But ever since he's left, they've just been kind of They've been kind of I mean, even with him there, they were good in the regular season. Matt, I know that you could probably back this up too, with you being a Purdue alum, but they were good in the regular season, and they would get to the NCAA tournament, and we know where they were. We knew where they were going to go. They were going to go to the Sweet 16 and lose, and I think that's why they ended up getting rid of Crean and them parting ways. But ever since that, you think that, okay, you get rid of this coach, you're going to expect results further the next year, and that has not happened. And now with them at 11-8, 4-3 in the conference, they're kind of in the middle, but on the higher end of the middle. That's still not where they want to be. And I guess you look at those teams that you would expect to be in a higher spot, and they're just not there. They're just not there like they have been in the past. And you question, I guess for me, I would question, at Indiana, what's going on there? Why do you make that coaching move? And I know we talked about it back then when it happened, but you would expect better results than what you were getting when they were there. That just, like I said, that has not happened yet. But the teams at the top are really good. Purdue is really good. They've played some games, and I watched the game, Matt. I know I was watching this one because I had texted you at one point, and you were, I think, in a huge panic when they were playing on the road at Michigan, and they only end up winning by 1 point, and that was a huge game that they end up winning on the road there. They were certainly tested, and they came out of it with the W, and now they've got Michigan coming up, and then on the road at Indiana. For you as a Purdue fan, do either of those two games worry you at all with Michigan playing, pretty good basketball and Indiana just being that rival, obviously?
Actually they do. I think this of any of the stretches for Purdue is going to be pretty key, both in their Big Ten title defense and then also trying to get a 1 seed going into the tournament. So yeah, they've got Michigan at home. So you're thinking, okay, they won on the road. They sure better handle them at home. But I think traditionally Michigan's been a tough matchup for Purdue. You got Mo Wagner, the 5 for them, who can step out and shoot threes, and Isaac Haas, he struggles to defend that. He can't get out there. So what Painter tried to do to neutralize that last game was he switched everything, and it turned into complete chaos the other way, because then you'd just get these weird matchups and breakdowns, and they would end up to wide open threes for Michigan. So, hopefully he learns from that. But even if he doesn't, I just think Michigan beat Purdue twice last year. In different personnel, but they showed just how tough they were, and they went to Michigan State and won on the road too, right?
Yeah.
So they're not going to back down. So I think that'll be tough for those reasons. And then Indiana, that's their Super Bowl this year, right? They would love nothing more than to take Purdue down. So just the atmosphere is insane. But that said, I think Purdue should be favored and have the talent to go in and win. But again, you just never know with those types of games.
Well, and the thing that I'm thinking of, and this kind of goes into the Purdue-Michigan matchup that we're going to see later this week, is if you look at, we did the same thing when we looked at the Big 12 last week when we looked at Kansas. If you look at how the conference tourney would shape up if it started, however, today, how you would have it is you would have Purdue obviously getting a bye, you would have Michigan getting a bye, you would have Ohio State and Michigan State, the top 4 teams, all get basically a 2-day bye. You got four teams playing the first one, then game 2, they get a 2-game bye. I would not be surprised this year. Like, I'm looking at last year's, Michigan played Illinois an 8-9 game. Then they went into the next game, and Matt, cover your ears, they beat Purdue, and then went on and beat Minnesota. Then they go on and beat Wisconsin. They won the tournament champion. I don't see this year for the Big Ten being that year or an 8 seed, where a 10 seed in Indiana or you look at Northwestern, they were the 6. They took down the 3 seed in Maryland last year before they lost to Wisconsin. I would not be surprised if we get to this Big Ten tournament in end of February, early March, and we see all of those teams, the 4 teams that get the 2-day byes. At this point, it would be Purdue wins. All right, Michigan wins. They play each other. Yeah, Michigan wins. They play each other. Then Ohio State wins. They play Michigan State, who also wins. And then it's just the championship is who out of the top 4 seeds wants to beat each other. And that, to me, is the biggest problem this year overall with the Big Ten, is that I can't see any team below 4 making a run of winning more than 2. Probably the only team that I would say has the best chance to win 2 games is the bottom 4 teams. I could see like a 13-14 matchup. Winner of that game goes on, beats the 5th seed. But besides that, no one below the top 4, I would say. I wouldn't put my money on them beating any of the top 4 right now in the Big Ten.
Well, and Matt, before you jump in, my question is, and it's kind of the same type of question that I asked last week when we were talking about Kansas, is are we too quickly counting out all of these other teams? Because when it gets to that time, when it gets to championship time, when it gets to tournament time, there's just something that happens with 1 or 2 teams that they jump up, and I'm not even necessarily saying for the Big Ten, but maybe it could be for the Big Ten when it happens, but in some tournament, at some point, one of those teams that you're not expecting anything from, that really have just been all season long, they jump up and they will sneak up on a top team, take them down, and end up having some success, and we all go, wow, we had them counted out from the beginning, and that just seems to be something that happens almost every single year in college basketball.
Yeah, I think the team I would say that might be is Nebraska. I don't think, that we're talking, the season ends right now. They're not in the NCAA tournament. In fact, I don't know how far up the bubble they are. But I guess of the teams that, me having watched Purdue play, Nebraska hung tough with Purdue at Purdue. And they've got some talent there. And then last week, I think it was, they went and pretty much handled Michigan no problem. It was a home game, but I guess I'm just thinking that they might be trending in the right direction. And, they had the 1-point heartbreaking loss to Kansas, too. If they win that game, who knows? So if I were to say one team, out of this mush that could emerge, I would say it's probably them. But that said, they've got some work to do. But they've got at Ohio State tonight, so tonight would be a great opportunity.
To kind of wrap everything up and to put a nice bow on it, to get to how many teams are going to make March Madness? A little bit of history lesson for you guys. I just went through all the way back to 2013. How many Big Ten teams have made the tournament? Last year we had 7. 2016 we had 7. 2015 we had 7. 2014 we had 6. 2013 we had 7. So all the way back to 2013, your best bet would be to say 7 teams from the Big Ten make the tournament. Now, if we're using, and I'm using Joe Lunardi as the barometer, this year the Big East, Big 12 is in that range. The Big East has 7, the Big 12 has 6. Right now, like we said, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Purdue are the only teams in the tournament right now. Maryland, however, is the very first team that Joe Lunardi has out, so they could be a 5th that gets in. Matt, I'll go to you first. When we get to March Madness after the conference tournaments, we get to Selection Sunday, how many Big Ten teams do you think will be in the tournament playing in March?
I think I'm going to have to go with 5. So we've talked enough about the top 4. I think they're all going to, barring a huge letdown, I think they all make it pretty easily. And then the 5th, I think there's really only 2 candidates I'm going to say are vying for that 5th one, and that's Maryland or Nebraska. Maryland, looking at their resume with the new RPI system, they only have 1 Tier 1 win. So, that doesn't scream tournament team, but they have a majority or a myriad of opportunities coming their way. Michigan at home on Sunday. They're at Purdue next week, at Nebraska in a few weeks, and then they get Michigan at home too. So they've got plenty of chances there. So I think that alone gives them the opportunity, and I think their record right now is okay. And then Nebraska, again, they probably have more work to do, and that's probably why I don't think they'll make it. But I think 6 is your absolute maximum, and 5 is probably the realistic number.
What do you think, B?
I'm going to go with 4. I'm gonna go with 4. I'm gonna say it's gonna be the top 4 teams, and I'm just gonna say that between Nebraska and Maryland, they're just not gonna be able to do enough when it comes down to it at the end to get themselves into the tournament. And those 4 teams at the top, they would have to do a whole lot to knock themselves out. So I think that it's a pretty set in stone right now for the Big Ten on a down year, still getting 4 teams. If those 4 teams go deep, it won't matter at the end of the day.
I'm going to agree with you, Brandon. I'm going to say 4 with a potential of 5. And the reason why I'm saying a potential of 5 is I'm looking at that Maryland team right now. And 2 things are going to end up happening. So I'm looking into my crystal ball right now. The first one is that they got to play themselves into a better position, because right now, if the conference tournament started tonight, they would be 7 playing number 10 Northwestern. That's not going to be a quality win in my mind. Then they go on, they'd play Ohio State. I don't see them winning that game, especially without Justin Jackson, who they have lost for the remainder of the season. They lost him a little bit earlier in the season. However, the second point is, how do the teams ahead of them right now play? Missouri is right now ahead of them. They're in the last 4 buys category. If they get a Michael Porter Jr. back, they're not falling out of the tournament in my mind. How does a USC play? How does a Providence play? How does a Notre Dame team play? All of these teams right now above Maryland, the reason why we call them bubble teams is because they're on the bubble. And when you get closer
Ricky,
towards,
come on.
I know,
I didn't
Captain
know that.
Obvious here. And when you get further towards the season, that's where we pull that pin out. And it's like, okay, we're going to pop that bubble.
And that's why I really think that there's too many better bubble teams than Nebraska or Maryland. I just think there are.
I'll give you one on the same category of Maryland that I could see getting in above them just because of the conference they play in. Kansas State.
Kansas State has been playing some of their best basketball right now, and I mean they're looking to move themselves up the charts, and they're a team that's, I think, catching a lot of attention of a lot of people. So again, like I said, when you come to talking bubble teams, which is, I think, where we're going to see Maryland and Nebraska being around, there's going to be a better quality bubble team this year than those other 2.
And I mean, right now, you look at K-State. When we last talked about them, it was before the Kansas game or right after. They lose that one by 1. They beat the mighty Trae Young and the Oklahoma Sooners. They beat TCU, get 2 quality wins. They'll play KU later this month. But before we wrap everything up, Matthew, any final thoughts on what we talked about today?
Just kind of maybe pulling it all together. I think what you guys are talking about there at the end perfectly sums up the Big Ten, right? Because a team like Kansas State has pretty much every night they have a chance for a quality win in the eyes of the committee, being in the Big 12. But a team like Maryland, not only do they have to win the big games, but then they can't lose the other ones, right? Because that hurts your resume just because of the standing of those teams. So I think that kind of sums it all up perfectly.
Well, and now we're going to turn it on to you guys. What do you guys think about the Big Ten right now? And then how many teams do you have making the tournament for the Big Ten? Let us know what you guys think down below in the comment section. If you're sitting there thinking, God, how do I become like Matt? How do I get on the Primetime Podcast and MVP? You check out patreon.com. That's exactly how you do it. Matt, I want to thank you for coming on and spending a little bit, about a half hour with us talking about the Big Ten, and we cannot wait to have you on again soon.